Hey everybody, welcome back to From Zero to 100 Million. Today, my guest is Oana Jinga. She's the co-founder and chief commercial and product officer at Dexory, pioneering company transforming warehouse operations with autonomous robots and digital twin technology. With over a decade of experience in AI, robotics, and strategic partnerships, she leads Dexory's mission to provide real-time, continuous insights into supply chain processes, driving smarter and more efficient logistics. Before Dexory, Oana was a strategic partnership manager for EMA at Google, where she enhanced retail operations through cross-sector collaborations, innovative solutions. Her background in business strategy and partnerships now fuels her leadership in product development and market strategy at Dexory, where she helps redefine warehouse logistics, efficiency, and industry transformation. Welcome, Oana.
Hello, thank you so much for that very, very interesting introduction.
Just before our chat, I had a chance to look into her Dexory, and I was telling you that I find it fascinating what you guys are doing. Basically, to explain it on a broader sense to everybody, you guys use autonomous robots to scan warehouses, right? And then provide them with real-time information. And
Yeah.
there is no human involved.
Exactly. We're quite unique. I mean, there's no one else who does this in the world at the moment, where we actually have the world's tallest autonomous robots, fully autonomous, no lines on the floor, no beacons or QR codes or anything else that they're following. And we use the robots to place them in warehouses around the world and scan those warehouses by using a variety of different sensors and cameras, digitize all that data instantly, and pretty much give our customers full visibility into what they have in their warehouses. So yeah, it's a hardware software solution, and we are a full stack business, designing and building the robots, deploying them, servicing them, but also everything that has to do with the software on top of that.
I love it. And you guys should check it out. I looked on their website, looks how the robots scan and how it translates into their system. It's fascinating. So I wanted to go back to the beginning of Dexory and ask you what motivated you to leave Google and take the leap into co-founding Bots and Us, which later become Dexory.
It's a pretty long story because we started as a kind of a trio. It's two other co-founders, so there's three of us. We started as a team over 10 years ago, working on some very, very simple robotic ideas for robots inside the house. That's when we were called, as you were saying, Bots and Us, and it was all about kind of human-robot interaction, having robots that would be able to kind of interact with people in the home, keep an eye on the elderly, interact with children. So it's a very, very different type of scenario and use case that we started with. The robots themselves were definitely not the tallest in the world. They were quite small and nimble, so they can navigate home environments. And we kind of started with the idea, probably kind of working from our living room. We were sharing a house at the time, like we were just kind of fresh graduates from university. And slowly that kind of started to become an idea for a business, initially the Bots and Us business. And then after the pandemic, transitioned into Dexory and kind of never looked back and moved into logistics and supply chain. So it was quite a long journey, I would say. And I think it's any kind of startup founder, probably you start with something in your mind, and 10 years later you end up in a very, very different sector, different product, different type of team that you're building. But I think it's just part of the journey.
Well, you're still working with robots, so I would say it's more like a different category, but the essence is still there, and I'm excited to dive into it. But tell me about it. How has your experience in strategic partnerships at Google influenced the way you build Dexory today? Because you work into a very traditional industry, especially with the pandemic, like everybody started ordering stuff. So everything moved online, and that was like an amazing time to get into supply chain and logistics, especially since there were a lot of issues with that.
I think it's a combination of, because when we started the company, I had just started my role at Google, and I was kind of for quite a few years, I did pretty much kind of two full-time jobs, building a business in the evenings and the weekends with my co-founders, and then working full-time for Google, which is not the easiest company to work with because they require a lot of, and they're very, very intensive in terms of hours and the amount of work you do. So I had to kind of juggle that for quite some time, but I always knew that at some point I wanted to have my own thing and build my own business, build my own team. I'm very passionate about building a team more than necessarily kind of building a product. So I always knew that at some point I'm going to move full-time into it. But I think my time at Google, and before that, I used to work for Telefonica, which is a big telco company, more on their digital team. So not necessarily like phones and phone plans and stuff like that, but still apps and digital products. The experience in both that and Google helped me to really understand understand a lot how to actually build very high performance, high efficient teams. I've learned a lot from some incredible minds in the industry, how they're thinking, what their leadership style is, how they're managing people, how they're making decisions. I've also kind of seen things that I don't want to do in terms of like, okay, I don't want to be that type of manager, that type of leader. So being able to get that exposure was extremely helpful. And on the other hand, the type of customers that I was kind of interacting with and working with, there's a big kind of crossover to the type of companies we are working with at Dexory now. So I think that exposure to the sector and the way they're thinking and their C-level and the executives was very helpful. The one thing, of course, that you don't have when you are in a startup, you don't have the brand name behind you, don't have that kind of resonance around like, okay, this is Google on the phone, please talk to me. And of course, everyone picks up. So that was something that it's quite a shock, I think, when I realized, obviously, we're pretty much no one and we have to build all of that brand from scratch.
Yeah, and I don't know what is happening at Google, but I met somebody else who built a startup while working at Google. So something is happening with that environment. So if you want to start a startup, you can work at Google. So building on top of that, because I'm also passionate about building teams. How did you build your team? What were you looking for when bringing someone new on the board? What principles guide the process? Because you said like at first there were just 3 of you.
This episode is brought to you by Vaunt, vertical SaaS and AI for residential developer. Vaunt has already powered over $2 billion in real estate transactions, helping developers streamline sales, marketing, and after sales. From interactive floor plans to automated lead follow-ups, Vaunt makes it easier to close deals, scale faster, and deliver a better experience for their buyers. And right now, for a limited time, you can try Vaunt's interactive floor plan called Spotlight for free at vauntos.com/AI. Try out today, vauntos.com/AI.
It's an evolution, I would say. And we were recently talking about this as a team because we are now just over 180 people, soon like working towards the big 200 number, which is quite overwhelming. But thinking back at the fact that at the beginning of 2023, so just over 2.5 years ago, we were only 25, it's quite a big jump. So the type of people and the kind of team we were building 10 years ago when we barely started to what we are building now, it's changed a lot. And the skills, of course, are different, but also the personalities and the way you bring that team together and the way that they have to work with each other also kind of shifted significantly through the different stages of our company. So if I go back to the early days, I think we were looking at the right mix of expertise and entrepreneurial instinct, because from our perspective as 3 founders, it's the first time that we ever built a company. We had no idea what we were doing, of course. So we kind of needed to just jump into it and kind of not be afraid in any shape or form of our ignorance and our lack of knowledge. But we needed people around us that were the same and that were not afraid to just jump literally kind of into the middle of it and start kind of building from something completely from scratch and hoping for the best, right? So it was one kind of type of attitude. And as the team obviously grew and the company grew, we are at a stage now where we're kind of in full growth mode. So we have to make sure that people are a lot more focused on diligence, on being able to repeatedly perform at their best. It's a very, very different kind of type of personality, I would say. And across the journey, we also had to be quite conscious of the fact that not everyone is going to be with us from the beginning to the end, and make some pretty strong decisions around that to ensure that obviously that team and the company is moving forward. So I think, it's different stages. It'll be very different type of profiles of people that you would have to look for.
This is just like a personal curiosity. Do you still have employees from the very, very early stages, or did they like moved on to?
We still have a few. Yeah, actually, we still have a few. And from the initial, I think we have people that have been with us for about 6 years now. And one that has been with us almost from day one, from 10 years ago.
Wow.
He's our VP of software, like pretty much the first person that we brought in outside of us 3. So we have had people that managed to just continuously kind of push themselves and challenge themselves to grow with the company, and then take on challenge after challenge to understand what the company needs from them at the different parts of our journey.
I asked this for myself because we're at the stage like where the company is growing and you have to act differently from when you acted like a year ago, and it's nobody tells you specifically what to do, so you got to figure it out and move with the market. I want to go back to Dexory because I am personally fascinated about the product, and because we're talking about digital twins and robotics, that it's not a new concept, but it's a growing trend. And what do you think makes Dexory's approach unique? You said you are the only one in the market doing it right now.
I think first of all, as an overall approach to what we do, like we never thought about like we're going to make some tech and then find a problem. Like we started with a problem in mind, and then we kind of thought of what's the best type of technology to be able to address this. So maybe to kind of explain a little bit, during the pandemic, we were still kind of working on a very different sector. We're still in the consumer side of things. And then we had a number of logistics players approaching us towards the end of the lockdowns, kind of asking, would you be able to use your robots to help us understand what's happening inside the warehouses? Because it's all managed, like we don't know where the stock is. Obviously, all the retail stores, the physical stores are closed. We need to get our heads around what's happening in the supply chain. So we're like, well, first of all, we know nothing about the sector and nothing about the problem. So let's understand the problem. Let's shadow people. Let's really understand like how things are done now and where the gap is. And then based on that, we went back to the drawing board and decided, okay, we need a solution. First of all, we need a physical robot to capture the data, but it has to be very tall. It has to be robust. It has to be able to properly navigate these spaces without kind of any infrastructure. So we're talking like 2 million square feet and above. And then from there, we kind of started building the product itself. So I think the uniqueness in that is like, first of all, we started problem first and solution later, which makes the solution very, very well suited for the environment and the use cases that we're providing. We could have just gone out to like an OEM that makes robots and say, okay, I just want a robot base and we'll put some cameras on it. That would have never worked because you would never be able to properly kind of integrate into the environment that we're in. And the second part, we always knew that we wanted to be a full stack business. So bringing together both hardware and software, because on the one hand, we're capturing all this data, but if you don't do something with it, if you don't feed it to the customer in a very simple, easy to understand way, they're never going to really integrate it into their workflow and actually do something about it to see the business benefits. So again, from the beginning, we knew we had to be both hardware, software, and full stack, which has complexity because you have to hire very different types of people, different skills. There are probably 5 smaller companies under one big umbrella. But again, it was part of us being able to deliver that business benefit. So again, that's something quite unique again to us.
What I gather from what you said is like you need to be very mindful early on, whatever you're working on. If your customers or your partners ask you for something, maybe that's the real need you can cover actually in the market, especially with the pandemic. I wanted to follow back on that because AI is huge right now, but also the problem is supply chain optimization is huge. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI in supply chain optimization over the next, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, it's a great question because from our perspective versus a few years ago when we were starting to come into the market with a solution and we had to do a lot of market education, we now actually have our customers coming to us and saying, by the way, we're getting mandates from the board to implement AI, to bring AI into our stack, to do more with it, but we don't really know where to start. So a big part of the focus from our perspective is to help them to understand where these gaps are and what they can do about it. And a lot of it is trying to use data and information to become much more efficient across all the different processes that they have. So I definitely see the evolution there being, there's going to be more data captured, more data points that have to be overlapped and brought together to find more and more buckets of efficiency.
That makes sense. And where do you think, because you both do software and hardware, where do you see the greatest opportunities when it comes to scaling robotics adoption?
Adoption-wise, I think it goes back to really kind of nailing that business case and really helping the customer to make the decision as quickly as possible. And the way we normally do that is working with them to really understand like exactly the impact it has on the business and kind of getting it in. Because what's happening a lot when it comes to robotics is people assume that it's going to be a very expensive solution. We're going to have to spend a lot up front. It's probably going to take us years to actually get the return of investment of what we're doing. However, that's not really the case anymore with a variety of robotic solutions, especially in logistics, because there's all kinds of different ways that you can finance those solutions, like monthly fees, like robot as a service, subscription models, and so on, which make it a lot easier to adopt. Because usually that the biggest blocker to adoption was the cost, which has kind of been dealt with. And the second kind of blocker, and I was actually just talking to somebody about it in my previous call, is the perception that you're going to have to do a lot of different integrations and software has to talk to software. And we have like antiquated systems here that are never going to be open to doing that. That's also not necessarily true anymore because with APIs, there's a variety of ways now to actually bring these together. And the solutions can be a lot easier to integrate.
It's something that I wanted to point out and I wanted to add on top of it. Probably you guys did it later because I think you also raised $800 million, if I'm not $80 million, if a Series B, right?
Yeah. I
Uh,
wish it was 100, but getting there.
getting there
Yeah.
soon. You did something very nice on this. You did like a total economic impact of Dexory
Exactly.
view, and you had like a return of investment of 219%, which is amazing. Like
Yeah.
everybody who works in supply and would see this type of return, it would be a no-brainer to adopt a solution like you said. So this is like for everybody watching or listening, it's good to show and try to measure impact. I know we try to do it with Vaughn. Sometimes it's more difficult and you can do it down the line, hire somebody to do it for you. But it's important to show these kinds of returns to increase adoptions.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say on that one. I mean, we worked with Forrester as a third party kind of independent body to do that, and the way they do it, I mean, without going into much detail, but they speak to a number of customers and they really kind of dig deep into how they build the business cases, where they see the benefits, and so on. But while it was obviously like a costly exercise to bring it all together, having that kind of third party validation stamp really, really helps, especially when you do
Yeah.
enterprise sales, because it's quite kind of, I think if we go in and we kind of tell them, okay, we're 100% sure we're going to see all these this business impact, this business impact. A lot of the times they'll obviously take it with a pinch of salt and thinking, of course, your salespeople are trying to push it down, right? But
Exactly.
considering that third party endorsement, it was very, very important for us.
That's a great thing to hear because we do our certain measurements, but it helps to have like a third party look into it. So
Exactly.
beyond logistics, what other industries do you think are most ready for robotics-driven transformations?
Manufacturing is a no-brainer again, and it has kind of been since, well, the Industrial Revolution. There's been more and more
Yep.
technology kind of brought in there, especially like if you look at what's happened in the US with the tariffs and everything else, is a
Yep.
massive driver to adopt more technology and digitize the sector a lot more. And I think from there, there'll be a ripple effect of that across the world from whatever they're going to start doing. So manufacturing is a no-brainer. And then another big one would be in terms of the retail sector, of course, and not just the logistics part of it, but also autonomous stores, deliveries, and all of that. I think, yeah, those two for me are already well on the way of becoming extremely automated and digitized, and that we're going to see a lot more.
I want to see more of that. I know like Amazon tried to do a version of that, but it's still gonna need to right now probably do more. And right now I want to go back to your like mindset on scaling the business because for me personally and for others as well, probably they're curious because you've seen like both the big tech and startup worlds. So you scaled like you were from the beginning 3 co-founders and then you're scaling to almost 200 people. What surprised you the most about building a company from scratch? Like, what would you say is the most surprising thing? I know you mentioned brand building a bit.
It wasn't necessarily a surprise because I think thinking back on it, it would have been obvious that was going to be the case. But it is a little bit of a culture shock when you're coming from the corporate world, especially when you have a big logo behind you. The other thing I would say is people say it's hard, but it's probably like 2,000 times harder than you think it is. And there's so many ups and downs. And I think, I mean, in the past 10 years since we started the company, I don't think there's been a day where I ever kind of thought, okay, we're in a good place, right? Like really good things happen all the time, but you're always
Yes.
kind of then thinking, what's next? What's next? You kind of celebrate for probably like a few seconds and then, okay, now we have another milestone or another thing we need to worry about. Like there's always something that you have to think about and worry about. However, I think I personally, like I thrive in that environment and I really kind of enjoy having to solve problem after problem after problem. So for certain people, it will be a perfect fit. For others, the uncertainty and the ambiguity, it will absolutely kind of like kill them and not be able to operate in that environment. And we do see that a lot, and also people that join us in our team, not necessarily obviously on the exec team, but there's so many unknowns every single day, right? Like
Absolutely.
everyone asks you like, hey, what do you want Dexory to be in 5 years? I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't even know what's going to happen in 5 days sometimes, right? And you have to be comfortable with that, while not obviously taking your eyes away from like the bigger vision and the bigger kind of scope of things. But I think, yeah, that was also something, again, not necessarily a surprise, but just something that people don't don't necessarily kind of talk about too much. It's how hard it is and how ambiguous and unknown everything will be at every single stage.
I agree. And also, it's like if you don't enjoy the process, I feel like it's very hard to overcome hurdles or, I don't know, shifts that we had. Like we had the pandemic happening, and then all of the market is changing right now. So you got to adapt to that. And there's no playbook in the market on how to adapt, and you have to. So
Exactly.
you mentioned like you don't know where you're gonna be 5 days from now. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Did you build Dexory with the vision of a global company from day one, or did you like do it?
Yeah.
You took it as it was, and how did that influence your decisions?
I think us as founders, we're really ambitious and big thinking people, I would say. So even maybe we sometimes you're a little bit afraid to put it all on paper because you're thinking like I don't want to jinx this and I don't want to think too big, right? But deep down we always knew that if we're all going to jump into it, we're going to have to make it as big as we can. And yes, it's going to have to be a global company, and we do want to make it a unicorn, take it public one day. Like having kind of that at the back of our mind, I think is always there because I mean I come from big tech, but my other co-founders like my our CEO and Andre comes from Formula One, so it's kind of like very different type of world, but extremely glamorous and cool, and obviously with a lot of opportunity. Adrian as well, from my other co-founder, comes from like some really successful scale-ups, and then when he took the leap, like similarly, I think all of us when we jumped into it, we could have had some very comfortable big careers ahead of us, but we're like, no, we want to build something, and we are going to make it as big as we can. So I think the answer to your question is like we never specifically been very diligent about it, but I think we all kind of felt it and knew that that's what we're building towards.
And also, I feel like you mentioned your co-founders and their backgrounds, like Formula One, especially there's a lot of overlap between sports and startups and business in general in terms of like mindset, team sport. So I can see that happening. I wanted to ask you, because you guys started out in UK, how did you adapt your go-to-market strategy for different markets? And I say that because we also started out in Europe and then moved to New York. And what helped you approach different markets? How are you finding your customers? Are they the same? Is the same approach, or how did you change?
It's quite interesting because I mean a lot of companies struggle a long time, and us ourselves, to kind of find product market fit, and then when you find it, it kind of hits you and you're like, oh shoot. It's now like a bit overwhelming and we have no idea what we're doing and how to properly organize ourselves to meet it. But working with logistics companies, they are by nature global companies to start with, so we were quite lucky because some of the early customers we've had did take us with them to different markets. So when we were in the new market, we never had to kind of start from scratch, build a local team, start doing local marketing. We went in there with already customer deployments and live customers, and then started to kind of spread ourselves from the customers into the market, and obviously having like in our instance, obviously having warehouses we could take other people to and show them our technology and so on. So it's probably a little bit of a different approach where we use our customers to take us to the market. But we now have a team in the US. We've got our office in Nashville. We're still doing a lot of our business, and most of the team is in the UK. And from here, we're working across Europe. We've actually just expanding into APAC and Australia and New Zealand very soon. And we're still doing that from here. So to an extent, there's I think that this is kind of misconception that you have to have a lot of budget and boots on the ground if you want to make it in North America or into APAC or in the Middle East. However, I do think there's a lot that you can do as a company from wherever you are, because considering in today's kind of global world and obviously online and Zoom calls and so on, you could track a lot from wherever you are. It's just a matter of when you really want to scale and want to be taken very seriously, that's when you do have to have a proper physical presence in the market. And probably North America is one that was for me a little bit surprising, because I thought we'd be able to do even more from the UK, being kind of English to English. And I mean, obviously time difference is a bit of a problem, but it's not necessarily like hard to overcome. However, they do kind of like to know that you are investing in the market as well, and that you are committed to the market in order to really kind of scale you and grow very hard and heavy with you.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because our company is in the real estate, in the prop tech sector. So since it's more like a traditional type of business like supply and logistics, I was wondering if they need more human interaction, or you can conduct majority of the stuff on Zoom and then you meet them in person because they want to know you're a real company, a real person investing into Northern America.
There's a lot that we can do online, to be honest. And I think also because logistics is usually quite spread out, even if you are in the US, I mean, we have customers in about 15 different states now. So you can never really have somebody local. You'll always have to be a few days away or a flight away or so on. So they're very open to doing a lot of it online. But there is a moment, where they do want to see you in person, and they also want to see your solution live somewhere and make sure that what you're saying is real, and you do what obviously it says on the tin. And at that point, you can't really avoid that face-to-face meeting anymore.
Makes sense. And I wanted to ask, my next question is like, how do you balance the speed of scaling internationally? You said you guys are in 15 states. You're probably going to grow more than that, with maintaining product quality and client satisfaction. How do you handle this? I know your solution doesn't require a lot of training because the robot scans it avoids people, but how do you handle that?
It's kind of like I was saying earlier, you just don't really know what you're going to do next. And like all of this stuff kind of hits you a little bit and you react to it a little bit last minute, right? So about a year ago, we realized we need a very kind of strong customer success team and customer success function. So we started kind of build that and make sure that we have a full onboarding experience for our customers, that they get to see the value of our product as quickly as possible after going live. And then obviously kind of still be there to hold their hand if they need to, because most of our customers are big enterprises that are used to getting that from their suppliers. So it wasn't even a debate. But I think this is kind of how we do it, is we have a dedicated team that continuously speaks to customers and to users, tracks how they're kind of interacting with the platform, highlights if there's any risks whatsoever, and kind of keeps an eye on that relationship. And I think, again, it's very important, especially because our model is a land and expand model. So we obviously kind of work with our customers, and then they have sometimes even thousands of warehouses around the world. So the opportunity is huge. And you have to make sure that each one of them is delivered to the top kind of level of quality if you hope for more business from that customer.
So it's just the same as early stage. When you're later stage, you still have to talk to your customers every day and make
sure
you have a good product.
Exactly.
What was your thought process where you guys were scaling Dexory? When you came across something you did not know what to do previously, how did you handle that? And I asked this for myself. As we evolve, you encounter a lot of things that you probably don't know what to do. What do you do then? What is your thought process around it?
Probably a few different things. One is we talk to each other a lot and we debate and kind of think, okay, what's the right thing that we should be doing here? And if none of us obviously kind of has a good idea or good option. Second one is like following our gut feeling and your gut instinct. Like, okay, should we hire this person or not? I don't know, it's something that there's a bit of a doubt in there. And I normally say that if there's any doubt, there is no doubt, because it means like it's not the right fit, whether it's a customer or hire or like, I don't know, expanding somewhere else or getting a new office or whatever that is. And thirdly is, and it's probably the most important, is kind of surrounding ourselves with others that either would have done this before or that have kind of been exposed to others doing it before. So we have a very strong group of investors that are supporting us and have been with us for a few years now. It's not necessarily that they have the answers, but they would know other founders from their portfolios or from the ecosystem that would have been one or two steps ahead of us and can kind of share a little bit on how they've done it. So that community and having some minds that you can just bounce ideas with was very, very helpful. I'm kind of not on the belief that you should just follow somebody else's model, because everyone's story is very, very unique. But hearing as many perspectives as possible then can help you make the right decision as well.
I totally agree. Yeah. And what is fascinating to me is I talk to a lot of later stage and even IPO founders, and they all tell me about this gut feeling and how much you need to train it.
Yeah.
So you make decisions in your business. And I'm trying to work on that more than data. And I want to say, last year you announced your Series B round, $80 million, which is also, congrats, impressive.
Thank you.
It means you guys are an established business. Like you said, you're expanding, which is amazing. How do you feel you changed as a founder from the first round to this one? And I'm not saying like fundraising should be the end goal, but it's a thing that takes you further. So you were a different person.
I think it's a combination of things, right? Because it's the rounds. We've also are in a very interesting group of founders because we've been raising almost every summer for the past kind of 4 years or something.
Wow.
So it's happened really fast, and usually that was on the back of kind of things going well, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the fundraise is a result of the business going well, and us as founders kind of change because of that business kind of evolving to start with. So yeah, more people. I always say that more people means more drama. So you kind of get exposed to a lot of kind of different types of conversations with people that you have to find solutions for and then deal with. So I think in the way I interact with people and then my management style, my leadership style changed a lot based on the past kind of few years, of course. The other thing is like how we look at the market, how we filter through things that we should listen to, things that we shouldn't listen to, in terms of like, again, going back to that gut feeling element, like, no, I think we should be building this because I feel it's the right thing, rather than, okay, how much data do I need to kind of back up that decision? So it's always kind of like finding the right balance there. And when it comes to the investment side as well, I think of course, when you're earlier days, like you're really kind of keen to get that money in. A lot of times you might make mistakes on who you're building relationships with, and then who you're bringing into your cap table, onto your board. We were quite fortunate because all our relationships were actually quite strong and very well fitted for their stage. But I think as we kind of raised our B and I think like working towards a C at some point, it's we know a lot better what we want from a potential investor, from a partner, and we do have the luxury of kind of making the right decision for the business rather than we just need the money to keep growing, right? So there's that obviously with experience comes maturity, and I think with that slightly kind of different ways of thinking. And I also think personally, like I'm a lot more grounded and I think a lot more relaxed in some of the things that are happening, because again, you've been hit by so many different things from so many different directions that naturally, you kind of just take it as it is and kind of focus on finding a solution. Whereas, of course, like, maybe 5-6 years ago, it was a whole kind of panic mode first, like, oh my God, what are we going to do here? What's going on? It's like, oh yeah, it's just another Wednesday. And yeah, so it helps a lot to kind of manage that pressure.
I agree, and I relate to it because I do feel I'm growing a bit calmer, but I wanted to double down on that. You mentioned that your leadership style changed and you're more calm. Did you do anything outside Dexory to do that, or just by the fact that you were in front of different situations that you encountered made you more relaxed and have more faith in your choices?
I don't think I did much outside, to be honest. Again, probably kind of being exposed to more people that have gone through this, and I can see them and see how they're reacting, and kind of seeing the ones that I admire and kind of thinking, yes, I potentially want to be like that or not like that. It's more, I think the other element is just by building the team around us and having strong leaders and strong kind of support within the company also helps, because there's some kind of pillars that I know I can now rely on rather than like, oh, we have to do everything ourselves as founders, right? So that was also something that in a way helped me. And it's a little bit not necessarily outside of Dexory, but within kind of my support system, I would say.
I wanted to ask you, you said your leadership style changed. How do you feel it changed? Like, how do you think you were previously, and what do you think it improved? You mentioned a lot about the way you communicate with people. How has that changed?
It goes back to what you're saying, like I used to tend a lot to just go in and try and solve problems and do stuff myself, whereas now it's more around trying to guide people into the direction that I think is right. It's kind of allowing them to come up with solutions to me, listen more, kind of just oversee stuff more from a bit of a higher level, and ensuring that the direction is right rather than being into every single detail. Because again, if you have to be in every single detail, it just means you're not properly scaling right.
Yeah, that's true. And that's what a leader does. So in terms of like going back a bit with fundraising, which is like a milestone because the company was doing well, has the company vision evolved with time? And this is something that I wanted to ask. Like, did you present that big, bold vision from day one? Or you just like, oh, this can be huge. This is what we want to achieve with this step. And how did that influence your fundraising process?
I mean, there's definitely been a massive evolution, especially from like 10 years ago for sure, right? But
Definitely.
Even since we shifted into logistics, there's been an idea that we kind of always had that we want to use autonomous robots to capture data and then obviously kind of do a lot of stuff with that data. But exactly what we were going to deliver pretty much evolving almost every single day with every single customer conversation. So while the ultimate goal was autonomous data collection and enabling our customers to be more efficient, how they are going to be more efficient is something that we evolved a lot. And I think also showing investors that you have enough to start and you have enough to kind of already prove value and give them some idea of where this could go. So far for us has worked quite well. Like, I don't think anyone expects to have everything figured out, especially kind of Series A, B. As you kind of going to see, of course, it's a lot more about metrics, a lot about growth, and kind of seeing the numbers coming together. But when it comes to the product vision, I think it's always kind of good to have, okay, we've kind of done step A and B. We kind of think C is this, but there's still a lot more that we need to learn, and keep that flexibility to be kind of informed by the market and by the users.
It makes a lot of sense. And how do you ensure like the mission and the team culture remain clear and strong as the company grows? You say you guys are in growth mode right now. How do you ensure you keep that?
So we've done everything from like actually establishing what we call our operating principles or values, some people kind of call them, and being very clear, okay, this is kind of what defines us as a company and what does it mean for everyone? How do we use those then in performance management conversation and reviews and everything else? So we've done kind of the theory, but most of it is around how you put that in practice and how do we make sure that everyone on the team really understands that and can live and breathe those as they go, and especially our managers, because we do rely, again, as founders, like when you go into 200 plus people, you cannot be in every single conversation. So you have to make sure that kind of everyone at every different level understands the mission and the vision and what we stand for, and obviously kind of enforce that with their teams. I'm not saying we always get it how you want things to happen, even if that sometimes feels a bit too much communication, then the more you're going to ensure that the team follows the lead.
In my experience, it's never enough communication, so over communicate as much as possible. What advice would you give to other founders that are raising money for hardware heavy businesses where timelines and costs can be longer? Because there's also this debate like, oh, you're doing software. Okay, I'm going to look into it. Are you doing hardware? That is a harder investor reach.
And I can't even explain how this was like 10 years ago, where people wouldn't even kind of imagine thinking about talking to you. If you were doing hardware. But I think what's been interesting, especially with robotics, there's been some massive rounds over the past year and a half, especially when it comes to humanoid robots. And I think specifically robotics is at its peak at the moment in terms of funding and interest. So that's kind of good. But any kind of other type of hardware, I think the whole panic around supply chains and logistics and production lines and everything else is quite overwhelming. What we did actually is we got quite a bit of public funding through grants initially.
Nice.
So almost kind of, I think it's about 3 million euros that we got at the time, because we were working with the European Commission at the time. The UK was still in Europe. Great times. We used that amount of money to actually build the first prototypes, the first products, and even have our first deployment with a customer before we went out to raise money. Because we tried to raise money initially, everyone thought we were crazy. This is never going to happen. It's too complicated. So we had to kind of find additional ways of funding it to actually bring the first products to market, and went back to the same investors actually. And when they saw like, oh my God, you guys actually did it, of course, it was a very different conversation with them. I'm not saying necessarily that it's easier now. It is a little bit easier because I think people are a bit more open. However, what we are kind of going through, and actually my co-founder is in California this week and was having some conversations, and what he was telling me is like probably 99% of funding at the moment just goes to companies that have some sort of AI in it. So like AI boom, like if you don't have AI, then you don't exist, right? So there's kind of trends and kind of peaks of different things. But I do feel like there's the perception of hardware companies has changed quite a bit. And if you're thinking about some of the most successful companies in the world, like Tesla, Apple, right? They're hardware products. They're hardware companies. So there's a lot more thesis now to base success on.
This is very good advice. But what I'm gathering from you, it's like you need to find a way to make it happen and then go back to investors and show like, hey, we managed to do this without you. Imagine what could happen if you get involved. Which is amazing. What's an important lesson you've learned that you'd like to share with someone who's looking to start a company in the AI robotics area?
I think going back to what I was saying earlier about the problem, make sure that you don't stretch yourself too thin and try and solve too many different things at once. Like the whole point would be when people say AI, it could be so many different things. But if you're going to start with a problem first and then decide, okay, AI is the solution, then that's going to take you much further. Because I think the big kind of era that we are entering at the moment is, okay, AI, but for what? And what is, especially if you're going on a B2B use case, like ensuring that that impact in the business case we were talking about earlier are as clear as possible and as quickly to achieve as possible.
Yeah.
And you can only do that by really understanding the problem. So I think whether you're building AI or something else, like just making sure that you really kind of get behind what you're trying to do with it first before you start building is absolutely essential.
So talk to users. It all goes to the first principle thinking. Talk to users, solve real problems.
It might be also difficult sometimes because what we're finding occasionally is like you're asking a user what is it that they want and they don't know because it's the first time that this is happening. Yeah. So you have to find the right kind of balance there. But at least kind of some sort of an insight has to come from that end user to be able to help you build around it.
What is one advice you would give yourself if you were to meet yourself at the beginning of Dexory?
I think I would probably just tell myself, keep at it, it'll be worth it. So to kind of like make some of the lows a little bit easier to work with. And probably, I mean, I don't know if necessarily if I would change how I behave or how I build things, but going back to how my leadership style changed, I think if I could have probably been a little bit more clear, direct, and specific around what I wanted, what I needed, and what the company needed and the team needed at certain times, I think potentially some of the decisions that I would have made could have been made faster. And even if that would have meant obviously being maybe more direct with people and not kind of being as protective of some of my teams, I think that could have like potentially moved a few things faster. But again, it would have been harder to think about it that way at that stage. So yeah, I think you kind of have to go through it. And again, you build that thick skin, you build the experience. And even if somebody would come to you from like 20 or 10 years in the future and tell you something, you'd be like, nah, it can't happen. It's not the truth, right? So yeah.
So true. So true. And I relate to this a lot, but it's a journey. It's, I think, the deepest self-development journeys I've been on as a founder. And my last question that I like to put it to it's more like a sentence completion to every guest that I have. To grow from 0 to 100, you need to
persist and be very resilient, because it can happen. I mean, it might happen like, lovable in 6 months, or it might happen in 16 years. But the most important one is to just keep believing that it's achievable and keep at it. And again, just be very resilient in everything else that's being thrown your way. I mean, I talked about this with quite a lot of people in when I'm mentoring them and when I'm kind of going through them. But the worst thing that can happen to your business is that you give up as a founder. Like nothing else that will happen to it. It doesn't have a solution. You can lose your whole market, your whole customer, like whatever that is. There's always kind of another opportunity to start again. But if you as a founder lose faith, then that's it. Like it's done.
That's true.
So I think that will be the main kind of advice, is just keep that in mind and obviously find energy and find ways to keep yourself going.
I love this. Thank you so much. I'll leave Dexory in the description. You can check it out. Oana also posts thought pieces on LinkedIn that are quite interesting regarding teams and also digital twins. So I guess they can follow you there as well.
Definitely.
Thank you, Oana, for coming over, and looking forward for our next conversation when you guys expand even more and more and raise more rounds. That
800 million, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Irina.